I'm Nia Bennett, and this is the story of how I destroyed everything my husband built. Let me start by saying this. If you're here for a tale of revenge served cold, you've come to the right place. But it's not just about vengeance. It's about reclaiming what was stolen from me. My dignity, my trust, my life. So grab your coffee, settle in, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button because you'll want to see how far I went to make him pay. Now back to the beginning. 5 years ago I married Darius Monroe. A man who seemed like he walked straight out of a dream. Handsome, ambitious, double-check. Ruthless enough to climb the corporate ladder without looking back? Oh, absolutely. Darius wasn't just successful, he was magnetic. People gravitated toward him, including me. At first I thought we were unstoppable. I mean, why wouldn't I? We had it all. Money, status, a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and invitations to every high-profile event in Manhattan. On paper our lives were perfect. But perfection has cracks, doesn't it? And mine started showing up in the little things. The late-night calls he never answered in front of me, the weekends he claimed were work retreats, but felt more like escapes. I told myself it was normal. After all, running a tech empire like Monroe Innovations didn't leave much room for romance. Still, there were moments when I caught him staring at his phone with an expression I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Regret? Whatever it was, it made my stomach churn. And then there was Tiffany Hayes. His secretary. The name alone makes my skin crawl now, but back then she was just another face in the background. Polished, efficient, always dressed impeccably. He kept Darius on track, or so I thought. Little did I know she'd soon become the catalyst for everything that came next. If you think this sounds dramatic, wait until you hear the rest. Because this isn't just my story, it's a lesson in power, betrayal, and survival. So stick around. You won't regret it. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment I fell for Darius. It was at a charity gala hosted by one of New York's most elite foundations. I was standing near the bar, sipping champagne and pretending to listen to some pompous art collector drone on about modern minimalism, when Darius approached me. He didn't ask for permission or hesitate, he simply inserted himself into my conversation with the kind of confidence that could either charm you or infuriate you. I hope you're not buying whatever he's selling, Darius said, flashing that devastating smile of his. Minimalism is overrated. Give me something bold, something raw. Like you. Cheesy? Absolutely. Effective? Even more so. That line turned into a 2-hour conversation about art, ambition, and our shared love for Chicago jazz clubs. He grew up in the South Side, while I spent summers visiting relatives there. By the end of the night I was smitten. We dated for a year before getting married, and those early days were magical. Darius encouraged my passion for art curation, even helping me secure funding for my first solo exhibition. In return, I supported his relentless pursuit of success, cheering him on as he transformed Monroe Innovations from a startup into a billion-dollar company. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I believed. But here's the thing about building a life with someone. You assume they're giving you their whole self. What I didn't realize was that Darius had compartments within compartments. There was the Darius everyone saw, the visionary leader, the generous philanthropist, the devoted husband, and then there was the man behind closed doors. The one who worked late not because he had to, but because he wanted to avoid coming home. The one who kissed me goodbye in the mornings but couldn't meet my eyes at night. Even now, thinking about it makes my chest ache. Back then, though, I convinced myself it was nothing. Just the stress of running a company. Right? The first Real crack appeared during our 4th anniversary dinner. Well, technically it was supposed to be our 4th anniversary dinner. Instead, it turned into a voicemail apology from Darius, claiming he'd been stuck in an emergency meeting and couldn't make it. I sat alone at Le Bernardin, picking at my lobster bisque and trying to ignore the pitying glances from the waitstaff. When his call finally came through later that evening, I answered with forced cheerfulness. "Hey stranger," I said. "How was your big meeting?" "It went well," he replied curtly. "Thanks for understanding, babe. You know how these things are." Did I really? Something about his tone rubbed me the wrong way. Flat, almost rehearsed. But I let it slide. Or tried to, anyway. A few weeks later I noticed something odd. Darius's phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand while he showered. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the screen and saw a text notification from Tiffany. "Hope tonight went well. Let me know if you need anything else." My heart sank. Need anything else? What did that even mean? I stared at the words until they blurred together, willing them to explain themselves. When Darius emerged from the bathroom, towels slung low around his waist, I forced a smile and handed him his phone without comment. That night marked the beginning of the end. From then on, I started noticing things I couldn't unsee. The way he lingered too long on work calls, the faint scent of perfume clinging to his suit jacket, the subtle shift in his demeanor whenever Tiffany's name came up. Each detail chipped away at my peace of mind until I barely recognized the woman I'd become, paranoid, insecure, and desperate for answers. By the time I confided in Maya, my best friend since college, I was already unraveling. "You need to figure out what's going on," she told me bluntly. "Because if you don't, you'll lose yourself completely." He was right. And deep down I knew it. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the door of our penthouse while I sipped my coffee and scrolled through emails. At first glance, it looked innocent enough, a plain white envelope with no return address. But when I opened it, my world tilted on its axis. Inside were photographs. Grainy but unmistakable shots of Darius entering and exiting a midtown hotel with Tiffany Hayes. Her hand rested possessively on his arm in one photo, her head tilted toward him like they shared some unspoken secret. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the images, each one more damning than the last. I felt sick, literally nauseous, as I stared at the evidence of my husband's betrayal. For a moment I considered throwing the photos away, pretending I'd never seen them. Maybe ignorance would be easier than facing the truth. But deep down I knew I couldn't ignore this. Not anymore. That evening I confronted him. He walked into the apartment looking exhausted, loosening his tie and tossing his briefcase onto the couch without so much as glancing at me. "Rough day?" I asked, my voice deceptively calm. He shrugged, heading toward the kitchen. "You have no idea." "Oh, I think I do," I said, holding up the photos. His face went pale as he froze mid-step, his eyes darting between me and the incriminating images in my hand. "What is this?" he demanded, though his tone gave him away. "This is you screwing your secretary," I shot back, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay composed. "Care to explain?" For a split second he looked genuinely guilty. Then just as quickly his mask slipped back into place. "Nia, listen, this isn't what it looks like." "Really? Because it sure as hell looks like you're having an affair." He sighed heavily, running a hand over his face. "Okay, fine. There's history there. But it's complicated. You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I spat, tears stinging my eyes. And that's when he dropped the bombshell. "She's pregnant." The room spun. Pregnant? How could this be happening? I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain crashing over me. Instead, I stood frozen, clutching the photos like they might somehow save me from drowning. When I finally found my voice, it came out cold and brittle. "Get out." "What?" I said, "Get out. Now." To his credit, he didn't argue. He grabbed his coat and left without another word. As soon as the door slammed shut behind him, I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. This wasn't just infidelity, it was devastation. And somewhere in the chaos of my breaking heart, a new resolve began to form. If Darius thought he could humiliate me and walk away unscathed, he had another thing coming. The days that followed were a blur of anger, grief, and restless nights spent staring at the ceiling. I barely ate, barely slept, and avoided answering calls from friends who could sense something was wrong. Even Maya's concerned texts went unanswered. I couldn't bring myself to talk about it yet. Meanwhile, Darius tried reaching out multiple times, leaving voicemails and sending texts pleading for forgiveness. "We can fix this, Nia," he wrote. "Just let me explain." Fix it? Fix what exactly? The shattered remains of my marriage? The trust he'd trampled without a second thought? No, there was no fixing this. Not anymore. But as much as I wanted to wallow in self-pity, I knew I couldn't afford to. Something inside me snapped awake, urging me to take control of the situation before it spiraled further out of hand. So I did what any betrayed spouse might do. I started digging. My first stop was Monroe Innovations' financial records. Thanks to years of attending board meetings and reviewing quarterly reports, I had access to more information than most people realized. What I found shocked me. Irregularities in accounting, suspicious mergers, and shady deals hidden beneath layers of corporate jargon. It seemed Darius hadn't just been reckless in his personal life. He'd been cutting ethical corners in business too. At first I wasn't sure what to do with this knowledge. Exposing him publicly would mean airing our dirty laundry for the entire world to see. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. If Darius thought he could betray me and still keep his empire intact, he was dead wrong. So I made a decision. I wouldn't just leave him. I'd dismantle everything he'd built. Brick by brick, lie by lie, until nothing remained of the life we once shared. Sounds dramatic, I know. But sometimes, revenge is the only language men like Darius understand. If I was going to take down Darius Monroe, I couldn't do it alone. That's where Maya came in. When she finally cornered me during a rare trip outside the apartment, I broke down and told her everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the financial discrepancies. She listened silently, her jaw tightening with every detail. "Girl, you need backup," she said firmly once I'd finished. "And I know just the person to help." 2 days later, I met Marcus Reed, a sharp-tongued investigative journalist known for exposing corruption in high places. Maya swore he was trustworthy, and after hearing my story, he agreed to dig deeper into Monroe Innovations' operations. "You've got guts, Nia," Marcus said during our first meeting. "Most people would crumble under this kind of pressure. But you're ready to fight fire with fire." His words gave me strength, reminding me why I was doing this. It wasn't just about punishing Darius. It was about justice. About proving that no one, not even someone as powerful as him, was above accountability. As Marcus dove into the investigation, I turned my attention to Tiffany. She reached out to me shortly after the confrontation, claiming she regretted getting involved with Darius and wanted to make amends. Part of me wanted to believe her, but experience had taught me not to trust easily. So I played along. "Why should I believe anything you say?" I asked during our tense phone call. "Because I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Darius promised he'd take care of me, but now he won't even answer my calls. I don't know what to do." Her vulnerability struck a chord, but I reminded myself she was complicit in my pain. Whatever sympathy I felt for her wouldn't stop me from using her testimony against Darius if necessary. By the end of the week, I had 2 allies, and a growing arsenal of ammunition. It all came to a head one rainy afternoon as I sat in my home office, surrounded by stacks of documents and screenshots detailing Darius's misdeeds. The weight of what I was about to do pressed heavily on my chest, but I refused to back down. Marcus called to update me on his findings. "You were right," he said grimly. "This goes deeper than we thought. Illegal mergers, embezzlement, exploitation. It's all here. With this kind of evidence, we can bury him." Bury him. The phrase sent a chill down my spine, but also a flicker of satisfaction. After everything Darius had put me through, the idea of watching his empire crumble felt almost poetic. But it wasn't just about destruction. It was about reclaiming power. Over my life, my choices, my future. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stared out at the Manhattan skyline glittering beyond our balcony windows. Somewhere out there, Darius was probably strategizing his next move, oblivious to the storm brewing on the horizon. Let him try, I thought bitterly. Let him see how far his charm and influence will get him when the truth comes to light. Because this wasn't just my breaking point, it was my turning point. And I was ready. Filing for divorce was the easy part. Or at least it should have been. I hired the best attorney in New York, a no-nonsense powerhouse named Patricia "Patty" Hayes. No relation to Tiffany, thankfully. With her guidance, I froze all joint assets and initiated legal proceedings against Darius. It felt surreal, signing documents that would officially sever ties with the man I once loved more than anything. But the real challenge came afterward. Word spread quickly among Manhattan's elite circles, and suddenly, everyone had an opinion about my marriage falling apart. Some whispered sympathetically about how poor Nia must be devastated. Others speculated nastily that I'd driven Darius into another woman's arms. Every sideways glance, every hushed conversation made me want to scream. Still, I refused to let their gossip break me. Instead, I leaned into the spotlight, attending events and giving carefully curated interviews that portrayed me as strong, composed, and unbothered. Inside, though, I was anything but calm. Each public appearance required monumental effort, like holding myself together with duct tape and sheer willpower. Meanwhile, Marcus continued uncovering damning evidence against Darius. One afternoon he showed up at my apartment with a folder thick enough to make my stomach churn. "This is everything," he said, setting it down on the coffee table. "Illegal offshore accounts, bribes to city officials, exploitation of minority contractors. He's built his empire on lies, Nia." I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. The sheer scale of Darius's corruption stunned me. How had he hidden all this for so long? And how could anyone, let alone the man I married, live with themselves knowing they'd caused so much harm? "We're ready to go public," Marcus added. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Was I? Of course I was. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposing the truth. About showing the world who Darius Monroe really was beneath his polished exterior. "Yes," I said firmly. "Let's burn it all down." The media firestorm hit like a hurricane. Marcus leaked select pieces of evidence to trusted outlets, sparking outrage across social media and news platforms. Headlines screamed accusations: Tech CEO exposed, Darius Monroe's web of corruption. Overnight, Darius went from celebrated mogul to pariah. At first he tried to deny everything. In a hastily arranged press conference he stood behind a podium looking pale and disheveled, insisting the allegations were false and part of a smear campaign orchestrated by jealous competitors. But his usual charm faltered under the weight of mounting scrutiny. Reporters grilled him relentlessly, forcing him to stumble over half-truths and evasions. Watching him squirm gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. For years he'd controlled every aspect of our lives, dictating where we lived, what we did, who we saw. Now finally the tables had turned. Behind closed doors, however, Darius fought back viciously. He hired a team of high-profile lawyers to counter the claims, issuing statements that painted me as unstable and vindictive. Tabloids latched onto the narrative, splashing photos of me leaving courtrooms or crying during phone calls with Maya. They called me the jilted wife, implying I'd fabricated the entire scandal out of jealousy. It hurt. God, did it hurt. Seeing my pain reduced to tabloid fodder made me question whether I could endure the backlash. But then I remembered why I was doing this. Not for fame or revenge, but for justice. If Darius thought he could silence me with slander, he underestimated just how far I'd come. Just when it seemed the tide might turn against us, Tiffany stepped forward. She contacted Marcus, claiming she couldn't live with herself knowing she'd helped Darius deceive so many people, including me. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe downtown. She looked different in person, smaller, frilier than I remembered. Her usual polished appearance was replaced by dark circles under her eyes and a nervous twitch in her fingers. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she began, tears pooling in her eyes. "But I need you to understand, I never meant for any of this to happen." Her words rang hollow, but I let her continue. Over the next hour she confessed everything. The late-night meetings disguised as work trips, the promises Darius made about leaving me, the way he manipulated her into believing she was special. By the time she finished, I felt both pity and disgust. "You can still fix this," I told her gently. "Tell the truth. Testify against him." She hesitated, fear flickering across her face. Then slowly she nodded. Tiffany's testimony became the nail in Darius's coffin. When she took the stand during preliminary hearings, her account corroborated every piece of evidence we'd gathered. Investors panicked, pulling funding from Monroe Innovations en masse. Board members resigned one by one, distancing themselves from the sinking ship. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself a small measure of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we were winning. Winning came at a cost. As the scandal intensified, my personal life unraveled further. Friends stopped inviting me to gatherings, fearing association with controversy. Even some family members questioned my motives, urging me to settle quietly rather than drag our name through the mud. The loneliness nearly crushed me. Nights stretched endlessly, filled only by the hum of the city outside my window and the echo of my own thoughts. I threw myself into work, curating an exhibition titled Fractured Reflections, that explored themes of betrayal and resilience. Critics hailed it as raw and powerful, though few realized how deeply personal it was. One particularly rough evening, Maya showed up unannounced with wine and takeout. "You've been carrying this weight alone for too long," she said, pouring us each a glass. "Let me help. Let someone help." Her kindness broke something inside me. For the first time in months I cried, not out of anger or heartbreak but relief. Relief that I wasn't entirely alone. As dawn broke over the skyline, I resolved to keep fighting. Not just for myself but for every woman who'd ever been betrayed, silenced, or dismissed. If I succeeded, maybe my pain wouldn't be in vain. The confrontation came on a cold November evening, just as the city was gearing up for the holiday season. I hadn't seen Darius in weeks, not since the avalanche of evidence against him had become impossible to ignore. But tonight he showed up unannounced at my apartment, his face etched with desperation and rage. "You're ruining everything," he shouted the moment I opened the door. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, tie loose, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. For the first time he looked less like the polished CEO everyone admired and more like the fragile man beneath the facade. I crossed my arms, refusing to let him intimidate me. "Ruining what, Darius? Your empire? Your reputation? Or the illusion that you're some untouchable genius?" "This isn't about me, it's about us," he snapped, stepping closer. "Do you really think destroying my company is going to make you feel better? It won't bring back what we had." I laughed bitterly, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "What we had? You mean the marriage where you lied to me every single day? Where you humiliated me by sleeping with your secretary and getting her pregnant? That, us?" For a moment he looked genuinely hurt, a flicker of vulnerability that almost made me hesitate. Almost. But then I remembered all the times I'd stood by him, believing his excuses, ignoring the warning signs. This wasn't about guilt or regret. It was about accountability. "You brought this on yourself," I said coldly. "Every choice you made led to this moment. And now you're going to face the consequences." He stared at me, chest heaving as if searching for words that could undo the damage. When none came, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. As silence settled over the apartment, I sank onto the couch, shaking despite myself. That exchange had drained me emotionally, but it also solidified something within me. There was no turning back now. Whatever happened next, I was ready. The courtroom drama unfolded like a Shakespearean tragedy, complete with dramatic monologues, heated arguments, and moments of gut-wrenching tension. Reporters packed the gallery, cameras flashing as lawyers sparred over motions and objections. At the center of it all sat Darius, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, flanked by his high-priced legal team. On our side, Patty Hayes commanded the room with razor-sharp precision. She dismantled Darius's defense piece by piece, exposing gaps in their narrative and forcing them to admit inconsistencies. Marcus provided expert testimony, walking the judge through the financial discrepancies and illegal practices we'd uncovered. Even Tiffany took the stand again, her voice trembling but resolute as she recounted Darius's manipulation and deceit. But the most pivotal moment came when Patty called me to testify. As I walked to the witness stand, I felt every eye in the room boring into me. My heart pounded, but I reminded myself why I was here: to tell the truth no matter how painful. "Mrs. Bennett," Patty began, her tone steady and professional, "can you describe your relationship with Mr. Monroe prior to these allegations coming to light?" I hesitated, swallowing hard before answering. "Darius and I were married for 5 years. To the outside world we appeared to have a perfect life. But behind closed doors things weren't as they seemed. He worked long hours, avoided meaningful conversations, and eventually betrayed me in the worst possible way." Patty nodded, guiding me through the rest of my testimony. By the time I finished recounting the anonymous photos, the financial discoveries, and the emotional toll of his actions, even the stoniest faces in the courtroom seemed moved. When I stepped down from the stand, I caught Darius's gaze. For a brief second our eyes locked, and I saw something I hadn't expected: fear. Just when it seemed Darius couldn't fall any further, another bombshell dropped. One that blindsided even me. During a routine deposition, one of Monroe Innovation's former executives revealed a shocking detail. Darius had been planning to abandon Tiffany and their unborn child once the scandal broke. Emails surfaced showing him instructing his lawyers to cut ties with her entirely, citing concerns about damage control. The revelation devastated Tiffany. She broke down during a private meeting with Marcus and me, sobbing uncontrollably. "I thought he cared about me," she whispered, clutching a tissue. "I thought he loved me." Hearing her pain stirred conflicting emotions within me. Part of me pitied her, understanding the depth of betrayal she must have felt. Another part couldn't forgive her role in my own suffering. Still, I knew her testimony would seal Darius's fate, and maybe, just maybe, give her a chance to start over. When the emails were presented in court, the impact was immediate. Investors who'd clung to loyalty abandoned him completely. Board members issued formal apologies for supporting him. Even his closest allies distanced themselves, unwilling to be tainted by association. By the end of the week, Monroe Innovations was teetering on the brink of collapse. And Darius? He looked utterly defeated, his arrogance stripped away layer by layer until only shame remained. Amidst the chaos, I found an unexpected source of strength: my art. Curating Fractured Reflections had been cathartic, but standing in the gallery on opening night, surrounded by pieces inspired by my journey, felt transformative. Each painting, sculpture, and installation told a story of love, loss, resilience, and rebirth. One piece in particular drew attention: a massive canvas titled Shattered Crown. It depicted a fractured king's crown surrounded by shards of glass, symbolizing the fragility of power and the cost of hubris. Critics called it hauntingly beautiful, while visitors lingered in front of it, visibly moved. During a Q&A session after the exhibition, someone asked me directly, "How do you move forward after such betrayal?" I paused, reflecting on everything I'd endured. "You focus on what matters," I said finally. "Family, friends, purpose. You rebuild not just your life but yourself. And you remind yourself that no one can take away your strength unless you let them." Applause erupted, but all I could think about was how far I'd come. From the woman who'd once doubted her worth to the woman standing confidently under the spotlight, owning her truth. The verdict arrived on a crisp December morning, delivered with solemn authority by the presiding judge. After weeks of deliberation, the court ruled overwhelmingly in my favor. Darius was ordered to pay substantial damages, surrender control of Monroe Innovations, and serve community service for his role in its corrupt practices. Additionally, criminal charges were filed against him, ensuring he'd face jail time for embezzlement and fraud. As the gavel struck, signaling the end of the trial, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Relief washed over me, mingled with a profound sense of closure. Justice had been served, not just for me but for everyone affected by Darius's greed and deceit. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me, shouting questions and thrusting microphones in my face. Instead of retreating, I stepped forward, addressing them calmly but firmly. "This isn't about revenge," I said, my voice steady. "It's about accountability. About proving that no one, not even someone as powerful as Darius Monroe, is above the law. To anyone out there who feels powerless because of someone else's actions, know this: your voice matters. Your truth matters. And you deserve justice." The crowd erupted into cheers, but my mind was elsewhere. All I wanted was to go home, pour a glass of wine, and watch the sunset over Central Park. That evening, I visited my childhood home in Atlanta, seeking solace in familiar surroundings. My parents greeted me with open arms, their unconditional love wrapping around me like a warm blanket. We spent hours talking, laughing, and reminiscing about simpler times. Later, I wandered into the backyard where a swing hung from an old oak tree. Sitting there, I allowed myself to cry, not tears of sadness but of release. For so long I'd carried the weight of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. Now finally I could set it down. As the stars emerged overhead, I whispered a quiet thank you, to my family, my friends, and most importantly, to myself. I'd fought harder than I ever thought possible, emerging stronger and wiser on the other side. Life wasn't perfect and healing wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time in years I felt hopeful. Hopeful for the future, for new beginnings, and for the person I was becoming. The new year began with a sense of renewal I hadn't felt in ages. With Darius's empire in ruins and my divorce finalized, I finally had the freedom to focus on myself and my future. It wasn't easy. The scars of betrayal ran deep, and there were days when doubt crept back in. But each morning I reminded myself of one truth: I'd survived the worst and now it was time to thrive. My first step toward rebuilding was launching the Bennett Foundation for Emerging Artists. Inspired by my own journey, I wanted to create a space where young creatives, especially those from underserved communities, could find mentorship, funding, and opportunities to showcase their work. The foundation quickly gained traction, thanks in part to the media attention surrounding my story. Donors poured in support, and within months, we hosted our inaugural exhibition featuring works by 10 promising artists. Standing in the gallery on opening night, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. These artists weren't just sharing their art. They were telling their stories, reclaiming their voices, and inspiring others to do the same. Watching them interact with visitors, confidence shining in their eyes, filled me with pride. This was what mattered now, using my platform to uplift others. Still, rebuilding wasn't just about work. It was about rediscovering who I was outside of being Mrs. Monroe. I reconnected with old passions, painting, writing poetry, exploring jazz clubs, and allowed myself to dream again. For the first time in years, I felt like Nia Bennett, not as an accessory to someone else's success, but as the author of my own life. Healing wasn't linear, though. Some nights, memories of Darius still lingered. An offhand comment, a familiar cologne wafting past, or even a song that reminded me of happier times. On those nights, I leaned heavily on Maya, who never failed to remind me that healing takes time. "You're doing amazing," she told me one evening over wine. "But don't rush it. You've been through hell, Nia. Give yourself permission to feel everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly." Her words struck a chord. So I started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto paper without judgment. Writing became therapy, helping me process emotions I'd buried beneath layers of anger and determination. Slowly, I began to see my experience not just as trauma, but as transformation, a catalyst for growth and self-discovery. Another unexpected source of healing came from reconnecting with Marcus Reed. After spending months working together on the investigation, our bond had grown stronger than I realized. He understood me in ways few people did, offering both empathy and humor when I needed it most. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling day at the foundation, Marcus showed up at my apartment with takeout and a stack of old vinyl records. "You need a break," he said simply, setting everything down on the counter. We spent hours talking, laughing, and dancing awkwardly to Miles Davis. By the end of the night, I realized how much lighter I felt around him, as if his presence alone chased away some of the shadows still lingering in my heart. Meanwhile, Darius's fall from grace continued. Sentenced to 2 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud, he disappeared from public view almost entirely. Tabloids occasionally published updates, photos of him looking gaunt and defeated during supervised visits, but I stopped paying attention. His punishment wasn't my victory. My peace came from knowing I'd exposed the truth and reclaimed my power. Tiffany, on the other hand, faced her own challenges. Raising a child alone while navigating the aftermath of the scandal proved difficult, but she handled it with surprising resilience. She reached out to me once, thanking me for giving her the courage to leave Darius and start fresh. "I'll never forgive myself for hurting you," she said honestly. "But I hope someday you can see that I'm trying to be better, for my daughter and for myself." Her sincerity touched me. While forgiveness didn't come easily, I respected her effort to rebuild her life. Maybe, in another timeline, we could have been friends. As for Monroe Innovations, the company dissolved shortly after Darius's sentencing. Investors fled, employees scattered, and its headquarters stood vacant, a ghost of its former glory. Seeing the wreckage firsthand reminded me of the fragility of power and the inevitable collapse of unchecked ambition. By spring, the Bennett Foundation had become more than just a passion project. It was a movement. Our exhibitions drew crowds nationwide, and partnerships with schools and community organizations expanded our reach exponentially. Artists praised the foundation for providing resources and visibility they'd struggled to find elsewhere. But beyond the accolades, what mattered most was the impact. Letters poured in from aspiring creators who credited the foundation with changing their lives. One letter, written by a teenage girl from Brooklyn, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Your foundation gave me hope that my voice matters. Someday I want to inspire others the way you've inspired me." Reading those words reaffirmed why I'd fought so hard, not just to destroy Darius's legacy, but to build something meaningful in its place. My pain had birthed purpose, and that purpose would live on long after I was gone. In interviews, journalists often asked how I managed to rise above such adversity. My answer was always the same: pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. You choose how you respond to hardship, and I chose to turn mine into fuel for change. Summer arrived, bringing warmth and light to a city that had seen too much darkness. I celebrated my progress quietly, hosting intimate dinners with close friends and taking long walks along the High Line. Life felt simpler now, less burdened by resentment and fear. Marcus remained a constant presence, his friendship evolving into something deeper. We didn't rush anything. Instead, we let things unfold naturally, enjoying each other's company without pressure or expectations. On a weekend trip to the Hamptons, he surprised me with a picnic overlooking the ocean. "I know this year hasn't been easy for you," he said, handing me a glass of rose. "But watching you heal and grow has been inspiring. You're incredible, Nia." His words caught me off guard, stirring emotions I hadn't fully acknowledged. For so long I'd guarded my heart, afraid to trust anyone again. But with Marcus I felt safe, seen, valued, and loved for exactly who I was. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, I realized something. Love isn't erased by betrayal. It's reborn, stronger and wiser when you least expect it. As autumn painted New York in shades of amber and crimson, I found myself pausing to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. Sitting on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, now solely mine, I marveled at how much had changed in just a year. The skyline remained the same, glittering and untouchable, but everything else felt different. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who walked into Lou Bernardine alone on our 4th anniversary, clutching her phone and pretending not to notice the pitying stares. That version of me seemed like a stranger now, someone trapped in a story she didn't know how to rewrite. But look at me now. A founder, a mentor, an advocate. A survivor. The scars were still there, of course. How could they not be? Betrayal leaves marks deeper than any wound. Yet those scars had become part of my story, reminders of battles fought and won. They no longer defined me, instead they proved how far I'd come. Marcus often teased me for being too introspective. "You're allowed to just be sometimes," he'd say, pulling me away from my thoughts with a kiss or a joke. And maybe he was right. I didn't need to analyze every moment or dissect every emotion. Sometimes, it was enough to simply exist in the present, grateful for where I was and who I had beside me. But tonight, as golden leaves swirled in the wind and the city buzzed below, I let myself linger in reflection. Because this chapter of my life wasn't just about destruction or revenge. It was about transformation. About finding strength in vulnerability, purpose in pain, and hope in the aftermath of chaos. By winter, Marcus and I had settled into a rhythm that felt both exhilarating and comforting. Our relationship unfolded naturally without fanfare or pressure, a quiet counterpoint to the stormy drama of my past. He moved into the spare bedroom of my penthouse temporarily, claiming he needed space to focus on his next investigative piece. But we both knew it was more than that. "Don't get too comfortable," I joked one evening as he unpacked boxes of books and records. "This isn't your place yet." He grinned, setting down a stack of vinyls. "Oh, I'm very comfortable. Besides, you'll miss me when I leave." He was probably right. Over the past few months, Marcus had woven himself seamlessly into my life, supporting my work while pursuing his own passions. Together, we brainstormed ideas for expanding the foundation, combining his knack for storytelling with my vision for community impact. One project in particular excited us both. A documentary series highlighting underrepresented voices in the art world. Filming began in January with Marcus directing and me serving as executive producer. Watching raw footage of artists sharing their journeys reminded me why I'd started this journey, to amplify stories that deserve to be heard. At the same time, I began contemplating new chapters for myself. My memoir, tentatively titled Fractured Crown, took shape as I poured hours into writing late at night. It wasn't just a recounting of events. It was a meditation on resilience, forgiveness, and the power of reclaiming one's narrative. Publishers expressed interest early on, but I insisted on taking my time. This story mattered too much to rush. And then there was Marcus. As the holidays approached, he surprised me with tickets to Paris, a trip neither of us had dared dream about until now. Standing beneath the Eiffel Tower, surrounded by twinkling lights and the hum of strangers' laughter, I realized something profound. Love doesn't erase the past, but it can reshape the future. The final scene of my story unfolded on a crisp February morning, standing in front of my latest exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum. Titled Reclaiming My Narrative, the collection featured pieces inspired by my journey, from betrayal and heartbreak to healing and empowerment. Each artwork told a fragment of my story, inviting viewers to find echoes of their own struggles and triumphs within them. As I delivered a speech to a packed auditorium, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by gratitude. Friends, family, colleagues, and even strangers filled the room, their faces reflecting admiration and respect. For so long I'd feared judgment, for my choices, my anger, my refusal to stay silent. Now I saw only support. "This exhibition isn't just about me," I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "It's about all of us who've faced adversity and risen above it. Who've chosen to fight for justice, even when the odds felt insurmountable. Who've dared to believe that our voices matter." Applause erupted, echoing through the hall like a symphony of validation. I scanned the crowd, catching Maya's proud smile, Marcus's encouraging nod, and countless others whose belief in me had carried me through the darkest days. Later that evening, as Marcus and I strolled hand in hand along the East River, I turned to him with a question that had been lingering in my mind. "Do you think people will remember my story?" He stopped, turning to face me with a look of utter sincerity. "Absolutely. Not because of what happened to you, but because of what you did with it. You didn't just survive, you thrived. And that's something worth remembering." His words stayed with me as fireworks lit up the sky, marking the start of Lunar New Year celebrations across the city. Below us, the river shimmered with reflections of light, a mirror of the hope blooming within me. Life would never be perfect and healing was an ongoing process. But standing there, surrounded by beauty and possibility, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready for whatever came next. Because I wasn't just Nia Bennett anymore. I was unstoppable,